Folks, welcome into a brand new episode of Train Wreck Fantasy Football. As always, Wake here with Meerkat and Jordan Rosas, riding the tricycle instead of the quadra bicycle, whatever a bike with four wheels is. I think that would be a car. Instead of driving a car, we're going to be doing a tricycle today, man. Great start. As you can tell, I've had a few in me already. O'clock. That's a great natural segue into thanking our sponsors, Outlet Liquor, the place to buy a case, George Urban Boulevard in Depew, whether it's wine, spirits, seltzers, QB1s, Loganberry seltzers, they got it all. They really do. So make sure that when it comes time for preseason football, regular season action, postseason, next season, what? You're always thinking of Outlet Liquor as the place to go for your alcohol needs, the place to buy a case. What's your outlet? This show is ours. As always, I say that on the cap. I'm going to say it here too. Talking ADP risers and fallers. This is a fun topic, I'd say, because, if Isaac Newton taught us everything, it's that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And I think in the case of risers and fallers for fantasy football, it's the same, because if someone's rising, obviously some people have to fall to make it back to their place where they started. Someone who we've been talking about a lot lately falling, Saquon Barkley. Obviously, news coming out that he's coming off the PUP, but we kind of knew about this a little bit last week before all this news broke this week. And I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot to begin the show. I'm going to let someone else do some talking. Dr. Kyle Trimble from Banged Up Bills joined us on here last week to talk about, just injuries in the fantasy community. And here's what he had to say about Saquon Barkley. So we'll just give a listen to that real quick. Also, Saquon Barkley, another first rounder that got hurt last year, maybe a little slower to come back from his injury. I know, obviously a different type of injury. He did have an ACL tear, if I remember correctly, last year. Have you heard anything different on him? Is he someone that maybe because of his injury status, you should maybe avoid picking in the first round?
Well, Barkley, he suffered the ACL, MCL, and meniscus injury. It's called a terrible triad, unhappy triad, whatever you want to call it.
Bermuda Triangle, I've heard, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a number of different there's common structure seen after tearing ACL. So when you have the MCL, ACL, meniscus, it turns into a pretty complex ACL injury as a whole instead of just your isolated ACL tear. Mm-hmm. So we see him coming back. We see he's putting the work in. He'll be close to a year when he returns, because I believe he suffered the injury in week 2, correct?
I think you're right, yeah. He and McCaffrey went out the same week last year. That's correct. Yeah,
that was a bloodbath in fantasy there. Mm-hmm. So running backs are traditionally slower to come back. The fact that he had the complex tear slows him down a little bit. Round 1, I'd have a tough time. I'd say it depends on where you're at drafting wise. If you're a snake draft, I could consider it like if it's back of round 1, maybe catching them at the back of round 1, early round 2, but I wouldn't go be putting everything in on Saquon Barkley, because I think he's going to disappoint you early on, because I think he's going to start real slow. I just don't think you're going to see that fluidity that made him the number 2 overall pick coming out of Penn State. So
that's what we got from Dr. Kyle Trimble, Banged Up Bills. He's going to be joining the cap for pregame shows this year to give us some injury analysis. So that's really great. Excited to have him along for the ride here. But Meerkat, I'll shut up now. I wasn't touching Saquon Barkley anyways, personally. Hearing it from him and in the fantasy football community, what's the earliest you would think about taking the guy?
Mid-second round. I mean, you see him, he's activated off the PUP, making a return to camp, and he says he's hopeful for a week 1 return. That Giants offense is going to need him in that backfield this year. They're going to need him as soon as possible, and I can maybe see him coming back week 1. I don't think they want to rush it. I mean, he's such a star, a young star in that offense. When an injury like that, you don't want to rush. But usually a guy who'd probably be the 2nd, 3rd, 4th running back off the board without this injury this season is now falling into like the mid-second round, early 2nd round. If I see Saquon late 2nd round, I'm going to take the flyer all day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And if anybody watching has on Saquon Barkley, any players we're talking about, feel free to chime in. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the matter too. Jordan, obviously Devontae Booker isn't someone that you really worry about them bringing him in as competition for Saquon Barkley. Not someone you're worried about taking snaps away. But in terms of injury, them bringing in Booker, bringing in Alfred Morris, bringing in more bodies in the running back room. 1, does that concern you? And 2, what's the earliest, same question to Meerkat, what's the earliest you would take Saquon in a draft this year?
I actually agree with Meerkat. I think he hit the nail on the head there.
Rare.
I actually put him pretty much. I put him in the same category with Najee Harris right now, a guy with a ton of upside but a huge risk. So
that's
if I can get him mid-second round, I'll take the flyer because you figure out of your top 5 picks, one of them's probably going to be a dud. But you look at who else is going to be around at that time, and the upside of Saquon is just so much higher than anybody else in that range. But of course, you do have that risk, so you want to make sure that you get a really solid player in round 1. And then if you're the guy that takes Saquon Barkley, you probably want to get some safer picks to round out your top 5. So I would not take Saquon and Najee Harris. I think that's playing with fire.
That's a great point, is understanding the risk built into these guys and knowing how, you can't construct the same roster or draft everybody, with the same kinds of risk. Rob Ryan saying that he had a friend take him 7th overall last night. Really too expensive for me. We'll talk about some running backs that maybe you want to take over him potentially, just as throwing it out there. Meerkat, would you take Barkley or Austin Eckler?
Barkley.
Jordan?
That's a tough one. I think I'd take Eckler.
I would also go Eckler. I'm very high on him this year. Barkley or Zeke? Meerkat.
Zeke.
Jordan?
Oh, absolutely Zeke.
100%. Happy we're on the same page there. How about Barkley or Aaron Jones? Meerkat.
That's a tough one. That's a really tough one. I think they end the year kind of around the same spot as long as Saquon is back to himself by week 3 or 4. Yeah. But I like A.J. Dillon this year. I love Aaron Jones. Don't get me wrong. That's pretty much a push for me.
Okay.
I think I'm leaning Saquon because of upside.
Okay, Jordan.
Yeah, I think at that point they're very comparable to me in terms of overall value. It really depends who I got first. Let's say I had a Christian McCaffrey or even a Dalvin Cook, somebody that there's some injury risk there. I would go with Aaron Jones. But if I got somebody safer, if I got a Jonathan Taylor, a Nick Chubb, then I'm like, okay, this person's I can probably rely on them. The upside might not be there. Then I would take Saquon.
All right, and maybe last one here, and it's not really running back, so it's not apples to apples, but Saquon Barkley or Travis Kelce, Meerkat?
Travis Kelce. Just such a safer pick, much more 100%. Value at the position coming into this season. That's a tough one for me because I'm not looking to take a tight end that high, but I'd probably go in there.
Yeah, Jordan, I'm with Meerkat. Are you running it out in agreement here?
Yeah, I mean, as long as I got a running back in round 1. If I'm the dude that took, Stephon Diggs round 1, I don't really want to go into round 3 without a running back. But as long as I have a running back, I feel good about. If Travis Kelce's sitting there in the 2nd round, I would absolutely take him just because he's just so much better than the rest of the field at tight end. He's almost a cheat code.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. I'm happy that we ended that little segment in agreement because it's not often that we have everybody on the show agreeing with each other. So it's good to know that we can get along. I'll play that game where I bring up guys around ADPs and everything as we go here because I think it's just a fun exercise because they're actual questions that people might be, falling into themselves as they go through drafts. And it'll also definitely, I know from my experience and how the mock drafts I'm doing now, talking with you guys has actually made me a little bit more prepared for this year. So say something nice about my co-hosts. There we go. I did it. All right, we'll move into in the meat and potatoes of the episode here. ADP risers and fallers. Kind of already got one out of the way with Saquon Barkley. And Meerkat, I'll let you kick this off. You can pick it whether you want to go riser or faller. Who's someone you wanted to bring up today?
I'm going to get my risers out of the way because I know we're picking 2 or whatever per category, but I told you beforehand, I just got to talk about the Green Bay offense post Aaron Rodgers coming back to training camp. There's so much movement in terms of ADPs so far after Rodgers announces news, drastic movement among the skill position players there. And you look at a guy like Davante Adams who hasn't had the biggest amount of movement, but when fantasy season started back in late June there, his ADP was as high as 6. He was being taken like the wide receiver 1 he finished last year as, and his points per game were crazy. If he had played, the full schedule, he would have had insane fantasy numbers. Now with Rodgers back after, he dropped to around an ADP at 12 with all the question marks when people were saying Rodgers was going to retire. Now with him back, he's back tied with Tyreek Hill right now. Actually, according to Fantasy Pros, they both have an average ADP of 9.7. So now people are torn where Adams opened up as the top guy. Tyreek overtook him for a bit, and now Adams is making a comeback there. So there's a lot going on with Davante Adams. Is he the wide receiver one now with Aaron Rodgers back? I think far and away, yes.
Oh my goodness, yes.
And then you look at Randall Cobb, a guy who has been fantasy relevant since like 2014. Fantasy relevant. Comes back to Green Bay, change of scenery, getting out of that hellhole in Houston, and people just are like, Rodgers loves Cobb. Rodgers builds relationships with these receivers. You saw his comments on losing Kumaro. Now people are expecting Cobb, which insane line movement. On July 29th, Randall Cobb had an ADP of 316. Now today, it's a 243. Big line movement there. People are buying into the Randall Cobb slot hype there with Aaron Rodgers. Then you go down the list. Allen Lazard is up to 187 ADP after being as low as 230. Marquise Valdes-Scantling, who Randall Cobb is still above in current ADP, which I love, went from 299 to 244. Tanyan dipped after people were high on him, and then they started realizing, and no Rodgers, dipped to 151, now up to 141. I'm still 114. I'm still fading him, but you see the impact Aaron Rodgers coming back fantasy-wise has had on this Green Bay offense. It's insane. The only follower we've seen is Amari Rogers, who is one of my biggest sleepers heading into the fantasy season. Receiver. He started with an ADP of 221. People liked him. LaFleur was raving about how he expects him to have a big role in this offense. He's looked good in camp so far. And now after the Randall Cobb trade, he's dropped to 322. Over 100 spots in a week in terms of ADP. That's insane. I'm still on him.
Bananas.
But, only player in that offense that is currently falling in fantasy, and I think that's probably the best value you're going to get.
Almost as good of a value as me realizing that one of the chapsticks I lost is actually just under my bed right there. So
now it's taunting you.
Now it's taunting me, but at least I know where it is. And just like Randall Cobb's going to be taunting fantasy owners this year, to be completely honest. Like I think
Scary.
Personally, like on the first point, I agree with everything you said. Second of all, I think that the Randall Cobb, I think there's a lot of overreaction this time of year. Like it's very easy to overreact and get hyped up on certain players and everything. But like, let's not forget, like he was in Houston. He had a good quarterback. He still didn't do anything. He was in Dallas. He didn't do anything. Like, I just don't know if we're going to see that resurgence. I feel like them bringing in Randall Cobb is more of a, okay, Aaron, you said you wanted him here. Bring him here. Worst case Ontario is like he has a positive impact on the offense, like from a team mindset standpoint, and he doesn't produce on the field, which is what I think is most likely. Jordan, how do you break down how the Green Bay Packers offense, just the shift in value since confirming that Aaron Rodgers is going to be here?
So I remember a while back, I think it's when we were talking about quarterbacks, everybody was down on Aaron Rodgers, and I was kind of like, I'll take him as a sleeper.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I haven't really shifted all that much. I feel like everybody else has gotten way much higher on the Green Bay offense than me. Because I do think that obviously if Aaron Rodgers plays, that's good news for pretty much everybody. But when we're looking at last year's numbers, it's important to remember that he was having an amazing season. I think he's still a great quarterback, but I do expect some regression to the mean. And so I don't necessarily see Davante Adams as far and above the wide receiver one. He could absolutely do it. I don't think that he's necessarily that far ahead of Tyreek Hill. I think if you get either one of those guys, you should be feeling pretty good.
Sure.
But I would caution everybody, like everybody in the Green Bay offense is getting a bump. I mean, I don't, you know what I mean? Like Randall Cobb, I'm not really all that sold on it. I think it was more of a move to sort of shut up Aaron Rodgers.
Oh, 100%.
I think that was kind of like a petty thing by him of like, obviously Cobb's not going to cost much because he's not really worth much at this point in his career. But I think that was Aaron Rodgers just trying to like
get his guy.
I don't know, get a little bit of like assert a little bit of dominance over the front office. Like, yeah, you're going to get the guy I tell you to get. And I think the front office was like, all right, fine, we'll get you Randall Cobb.
Yeah, I'm fading Randall Cobb. I'm fading MVS this year.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting too because recently in the Green Bay offense, there hasn't been a ton of guys that have produced like that wide receiver 2 spot for a while.
It's been
pretty much been whoever happens to be playing there plays really well.
Exactly.
I remember
think it's going to end up being Lazard though this year.
I don't know. See, because the thing that worries me with Lazard is that I don't think he's all that great of a receiver. It's just a position. And so now that you bring in Cobb, you've got Rodgers, Marcus Valdes-Scantling is there. I don't think Lazard's hold on that position is all that strong. And if he loses that spot, I think his value is just gone. I mean, I remember it was like 5 years ago when Jarrett Boykin was like putting up really good numbers in Green Bay.
Jarrett Boykin,
then he came to Buffalo and he didn't even I don't even think he made the practice squad.
Something like that.
You know what I mean? So like that's what you have to watch out with Green Bay receivers is like, yeah, you got the top guy. Obviously, like Jordy Nelson was great for a long time. Devontae Adams is fantastic. But that number 2 role, I really think is a product of Rodgers. And now that you got Cobb in the mix, I'm very cautious on everybody behind Adams.
Yeah, and that's why we're talking ADP risers, not value risers. So saying the guys that are going to be rising and like, if they go over a certain point, maybe don't take them, understand how the value of these players is changing based on where they're going. And that kind of leads into who I wanted to bring up first. I love rookies in fantasy. Rookies in fantasy are exciting. They're unknown. They're extremely risky. And when they work out, they really work out. And Javonte Williams is a guy that I've been really, really high on. And Melvin Gordon's a guy that I'm not really high on. And as of lately, there's been a lot of stuff coming out of Broncos camp. Pat Shurmur has been absolutely raving about Javonte Williams. A real quote from him goes, he's been terrific. His running ability is obvious, but the things that we see are his instincts as a football player. Some people just get it. We've been around people that just don't quite get it, and they wake up every morning and start over. Javonte gets it, and he shows up, and it shows up in his pass protection and the way he's able to get lined up, his awareness. He has a really bright future. Now, if this was the Buffalo running backs and they were having a great camp, they would say that. If they weren't having a great camp, we know that McDermott would say they have a long road ahead of them. That's every training camp. That's every coaching staff. They're not going to publicly endorse a player like this unless there's something real going on behind the scenes. So Javonte Williams should be getting this rise in ADP. But it's kind of already started, and that's what concerns me, is that ECR Experts Consensus Ranking has him at RB31, but he's already ADP RB24. And I just don't think that – I feel like we're already drafting him at his ceiling, and after we get to see him preseason action – it's just going to keep going up, and we're going to see him being drafted among guys who are clear-cut RB1s on their teams, and that's just not where he belongs. Because Melvin Gordon, even with Phillip Lindsay there last year, yes, Phillip Lindsay was, how do I say this politely, terrible. But, Melvin Gordon, he was good enough to, basically, okay, not good enough. He kept fumbling the ball. He has a really bad fumble issues now, and the injury issues are behind him. But every time Phillip Lindsay came in, when Melvin Gordon's leash shrunk, Phillip Lindsay just being terrible made the leash just grow. It was like a retractable leash. It wasn't like, it was just Melvin Gordon didn't have anyone competing with him. Now he does. So I loved Javonte Williams' value when he was going at 28, maybe closer to the 30s. But now, especially when he's not going to get the lion's share of the work come week 1, I just am definitely not going to have as many shares of him as I thought I would, and I might actually have more Melvin Gordon shares than I thought I would come the beginning of the season, because RB24 is a little too rich for me. I mean, he's going ahead of Mike Davis. Would you guys take Mike Davis or Javonte Williams?
I'd go Mike Davis.
I see you that late. I mean, I'm probably Davis is safer. It depends how I'm going to be feeling that day, because they're kind of close for me, because I think Williams might have a higher ceiling. I think people are a little too high on Davis, but that's a different conversation.
He soon could surpass Chris Carson. Would you take Javonte Williams or Chris Carson?
Chris Carson.
Yeah. So he's around like Kareem Hunt, James Robinson, Myles Gaskin. It's a muddy area of running backs. I just don't think he belongs there yet. So definitely keep an eye on how high he gets. Don't like it one bit. It stinks.
Yeah, I think a bunch of the guys you mentioned there have at least had a season where they've kind of proven that that at least that potential is there. It's justified. It's doable. Whether or not they actually reach that level or not is another story, But James Robinson had a great year last year. Obviously, Travis Etienne is going to cut into those touches. Kareem Hunt is kind of second fiddle in Cleveland, but we saw him in Kansas City, what he could do when he's a lead guy. And we haven't seen Javonte Williams in a lead role. So, I mean, the ceiling theoretically is RB1, but the floor is much lower. So, I mean, it really, to me, just depends who you have. I think if you've gotten safer picks, I think Chris Carson's a safe pick with limited upside.
Yeah.
So if you got a couple of those guys early on, I'd probably lean towards Javonte Williams. Let me take a shot on somebody. But, if I got Saquon Barkley, if I've got, somebody else with question marks, then I might lean towards Melvin Gordon where okay, I'd rather at least have somebody that I can plug in as a flex, maybe RB2, not going to win me leagues, but it's in patch holes, Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. Jordan, while you're at it here, give us one of your risers for ADP right now.
So I didn't bring this up when we were in our meeting first, but I wanted to talk about Robert Woods is actually rising for me.
Yeah, okay, go for it.
For a while, I've always loved him ever since he played in Buffalo. Love the intensity he played with, being a guy that small and that good at blocking, just so much fun to watch. But he's really done a lot of great things with the Rams, and especially with the injury to Cam Akers, I think that Robert Woods can be in the fold to get some more carries. He would get 1 to 3 carries a game on a jet sweep here and there. Mm-hmm. I think if they're looking for people to put to run the football, I think he gets some more carries. And obviously Matt Stafford, we're expecting more passing situations. So I think that Cooper Kupp is being slept on a lot, but I really like the potential for Robert Woods to go from being sort of the quintessential wide receiver 2 to really upper tier wide receiver 2.
Yeah, I would like to see, a lot of this is based on preseason and what we see in the preseason. And if we do see Robert Woods maybe get a scripted run, a scripted Isaiah McKenzie type of play, he's done those in LA before. Mm-hmm. So if we see him get some kind of work like that, definitely could see the ADP go up a little bit. And I'm surprised that him and Cooper Kupp aren't higher than they are already with Matthew Stafford in town. But Meerkat, what are your thoughts on Robert Woods and his potential this year?
Oh, I think Robert Woods has his, highest ceiling ever coming into a season with Matt Stafford. He's a great receiver. He does it all on the field. He could be an outside guy, an inside guy. He can block for you. He can run like Jordan brought up, and he's been busy at camp so far. Him and Stafford already building a bit of a rapport. I love Robert Woods this year. I like him more than Cooper Kupp. So, I think all those LA receivers should be bumped up a little bit. Some guys like Van Jefferson might pop out at you this year, but I'm all over Robert Woods.
It's weird to see, it's fun seeing when the experts, and this is one tool that Fantasy Pros has that's really interesting, is you can see the difference between what experts think about a player and what the general public thinks. And they have Robert Woods at ECR 40, so the 40th overall player in fantasy. He's being drafted around 50 right now. So the smart people who do fantasy are a little more keen on Robert Woods than the general public. So that's definitely something you should take note of. I think that's a good guy for Jordan to bring up right here. Meerkat, back to you. I know, the Packers as a whole were your risers and fallers. We're kind of doing a weird order today. We're not really going in any order.
I kind of messed it up, guys. Just saying my risers was the entire Packers.
I mean, I gave one riser and a faller at the same time, so I didn't help. So give us one of your fallers, Meerkat.
I'll give you guys a faller. I know this is a super popular one. I'm not really going out on a limb here, but I'm avoiding James Conner this year with his ADP. You see it falling. Last year, he finished his RB 25, but crazy touchdown dependent. And no big surprise, he didn't start more than 13 games in a season again.
No way.
So, he started out with an ADP of around 70. People are like, oh, big name. He had one good year in 2018. He's in a new spot now with Arizona. Who do they have? Who's Chase Edmonds? And so he started out around 70. Down to 90 now, falling pretty quickly because what do you know? He already has a camp injury, and Chase Edmonds is shining in camp. They can't get enough of Chase Edmonds down there, and what he is with him out, not playing. Edmonds is getting all those touches right now in camp. He's going to get those, if he even sees the preseason. I think he's the running back one heading into the year, regardless of what Connor's done in the past, which other than 2018 where he had 71 targets, and so it gave him almost 500 receiving yards, but that's not great production on that amount of targets. Catch rate wasn't there. He was touchdown reliant like he is every year. I don't think that's going to be so much the case this year. I'm fading the hell out of James Conner, and he's falling with the ADP, so...
Yep. No, I'm right there with you. And actually, I'm doing another running back tandem for and faller, and I'm doing Chase Edmonds as an ADP riser and James Conner as a faller. I think it's one of the most obvious situations in the NFL that is not getting the most attention. James Conner, one of the reporter down in Arizona was talking to him the other day, and he basically implied that he was under the impression that he's the lead back in this offense. And if that's coming from the guy who thinks he's the lead back in the offense, like that's not reporters just saying this and implying it. Like it's word for word what he said. He said his concerns this offseason were putting on more weight because he's taking on a bigger workload and improving his receiving ability, which he was already a great receiving running back in his own. So, just after hearing that, I'm really excited to see how they use him in the preseason. I think that we're going to come to find out that, Chase Edmonds is probably going to be the guy that they have when they're leading, when they're in close games, and when it's, when they're behind. And that'll probably be like a 60-40-ish kind of split. Whereas if they're ahead by a lot, James Conner gets more of the workload. I feel like it's more of a game situational timeshare than just a general 60-40, 70-30, 65-35 make up a ratio. I don't care. I'm very excited to see how they use him. And Kingsbury, he's been saying that Edmonds has looked like a workhorse running back, and that's not something that anyone thought that we would hear based on how small he was. But like I said, he's putting on weight. I think his ADP is going to skyrocket. He's going around RB 29 right now. James Conner around RB 38. I would take Chase Edmonds around RB 26. I think I'd be willing to do that, especially half PPR, full point PPR. Maybe not standard, but
I'm taking Chase Edmonds over James Conner.
It's easy.
Not even a question. Yeah,
Chase Edmonds or Javonte Williams.
Chase Edmonds.
Yeah, Jordan. Chase Edmonds or Javonte Williams.
I think Chase Edmonds. I'm not super high on either of them. I want to see a little bit more out of them. I think Chase Edmonds, I don't want to make too much out of nothing because, he had a year to sort of prove himself last year. And yeah, he looked good in spurts, but I wouldn't say he looked like a workhorse back. It's still early in the preseason.
Yeah.
But, I do think that James Conner is definitely a dangerous trap for a lot of casual fantasy players because he is somebody that, you have to recognize you're not drafting James Conner from 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say necessarily stay away from him. I think there is value to him, but he's not an RB2 with RB1 upside anymore. He's not that guy.
No, definitely.
Whereas Chase Edmonds is definitely trending towards that category. The ceiling is very high. And, they had Kenyon Drake last year who was supposed to be the lead. So I can understand where maybe Chase Edmonds wasn't, the season script wasn't for him to be the lead back, even if they were impressed and saw a lot of stuff they liked. Now they have the opportunity to design the offense more with him in mind. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes. I would say I would caution don't reach too much on him, but definitely pay attention to him rising because if we're seeing that separation between these two already, it's still early in the preseason, and that could turn into a workhorse back situation rather than just like a Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, 1A, 1B type of thing, which is what I was kind of expecting heading into the season. But Chase Edmonds has definitely got to watch.
Yeah, he's actually fallen in ADP since the beginning of the offseason here. Fantasy Pros tracks it back to about early June, and he's fallen only by 5 spots. So it's nothing really to shake your head at, nothing to shake your head at. Yeah, don't shake your head at it because it doesn't matter. Right. Wait, no, shake your head at it because it doesn't matter.
Well, it is interesting, though, to think.
Yeah, I have to figure out how analogies work. I'm sorry.
It is interesting to think of him falling, though, as a running back when we've had some injuries to guys. Like, obviously, Saquon Barkley's fallen a little bit. Not that, I would take Barkley over Edmonds.
But people might be willing to take more running backs early because of the volatility.
Right. So it's interesting to see how little things at the top, like Saquon Barkley, can really have ramifications rounds after.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. That's definitely an interesting point. Good point, Jordan. I'll let you keep going since you said something smart. Let's give us another riser here or a faller. Take your pick. Who do you want to talk about?
I'm trying to think of the way to phrase this. I think the best way to say it is a riser is any defense playing against the Jets. I think that offense is in for a world of trouble. I still like Tevin Coleman. I like Michael Carter as fantasy players, but I have yet to see a report out of Jets training camp saying pretty much anything good about Zach Wilson. I know he's a rookie. I know that there's been some drama, but it's like, he didn't show up to training camp on time, and then there's this stuff where he wasn't, didn't have a feel for driving the highways in New Jersey or whatnot. And a lot of people can brush that off as it's funny. I know Brother Bill on Twitter he's got a whole segment about he's stuck in traffic. Yeah. But, remember that this is a young guy who's just coming out of college. He's coming from Utah to New York City. That is a huge culture shock. And if he's not settled, if mentally, emotionally, he's feeling stressed, far from family, these are all things that can affect his style of play. And when you're in a big city, you've got cameras on you. If he can't play well, they don't really have a solid QB2 behind him. And I know there's a lot of Jets wide receivers that have been sort of that breakout or bust season for them. You look at Denzel Mims, you look at Corey Davis. You know what I mean? Like a lot of these guys that this was supposed to be a year where we see what they're going to be for the rest of their career. Either they make it, they show up this year, or they're going to be labeled as busts. And I don't see this offense producing. I think if you're streaming defenses, anytime you can get somebody against the Jets, I think it's going to be great this year.
Yeah, they have the most wide receiver twos in the entire NFL between like Corey Davis, Keelan Cole, Denzel Mims, everybody on there. Rashad Perriman's on the Lions now, but you get my point. Yeah, their earliest wide receiver is Corey Davis in terms of ADP, and he's for 51. And based on all the reports out of training camp, like Zach Wilson has just not looked good once. And you can see slowly but surely these ADPs of these wide receivers starting to slip a little bit. So you could find a value there just because they're going to be losing a lot of games and they might have to throw a shit ton. But from a talent and from a upside perspective, it's definitely worrisome. Meerkat, Jets wide receivers, have any of them interest you? Do you think if any of them fall far enough, they could interest you?
Biased aside against how much we hate the Jets, I think Denzel Mims is actually a really good receiver.
I do too.
Zach Wilson's even competent this year. Doesn't matter if he's throwing a lot of picks, which I do have him to lead the NFL in interceptions this year. But if he's even competent, he's going to be getting the ball out to Davis and Mims at least a little bit. They have talent in that receiver room. Am I going to be targeting anyone, though? No, I'm not. If someone falls in my lap into a favorable spot, if it's a Mims or a Davis, I'll take a look for sure. But yeah, they deserve to be falling. All the reports about Wilson are just not great, and he shouldn't be inspiring a lot of faith.
The other thing I wanted to bring up with that is there's so many like you said, take out the most wide receiver twos in the league. But I think it's going to be tough for anybody to get separation. And even when you finally do get some separation, 6 games a year, you got Stephon Gilmore, Trey White, Xavier Howard just re-signed with Miami. You know what I mean? So even if you do have a wide receiver that sort of establishes himself as the one,
that's a third of the year.
A third of the year, they're probably going to be shut down. There's nobody on that. They don't have any wide receivers that are better than those 3 corners. You know what I mean? And especially if Zach Wilson's throwing picks, they might be throwing it more, but every interception is the end of a drive.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. So I can, in deep PPR leagues, I could receivers as they fall into your lap in the late rounds, but man, at their actual ADP, I would not at all. That's reaching for him, in my opinion.
Even if the Patriots are, a subpar team again, Bill Belichick has always been amazing against rookie quarterbacks. I think the Jets are in for a long year, and
keep saying bad things about the Jets. Keep saying bad things about the Jets.
I like Michael Carter. I like Tevin Coleman. I think the dump off and screen passes are going to be the bread and butter of that offense because I just don't see anything else working for them.
Meerkat, I know you have one more guy you want to bring up. Wow. I feel like Zach Wilson. I know you have someone to bring up who will disappoint this year too. So who else do you have falling in ADP and why?
Miles Sanders, RB17 with an ADP of 33 right now. I mean, the lowest he's been is 36, and the highest he's been is 30 so far this season. So people are pretty set pat on what they think of Miles Sanders, and they think pretty highly of him. That's a third round pick right there. So Am I high on him like that, or do I think he performs to that? No, I think he's going to start falling with reports out of camp now coming that Kenneth Gainwell, the rookie they took in the 5th round, is looking really good. They still have Boston Scott, who looked decent last year, and they signed Kerryon Johnson, who I know isn't great, but they signed him.
When they
gave him enough money for it to matter.
Yeah, that felt like the prototypical Eagles signing. I feel like them and the Lions just recycle running backs between each other. It's fun.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a running back by committee necessarily. I think Sanders is the lead guy in the offense, but he's going to have a lot of carries taken away by him from these guys this season. And you know who else is going to take a lot of carries this year is Jalen Hurts, who we talked about on Free Money Football. Maybe my favorite prop out of the year is Jalen Hurts over rushing yards for season-long props. But we're talking about fantasy right now. And, I just don't love Sanders at where he's being drafted right now. He's shown movement like he's going down. Gainwell is gaining ADP, so
he's gaining well.
Yeah, exactly. So is he a guy who is technically a faller right now? Not necessarily, but I think he is going to be over the next couple weeks as people get into like the real, bulk of fantasy football season. You look last year, he was pretty productive, but he couldn't stay healthy that much. The numbers weren't mind-blowing. He fumbled a decent amount. As a receiver, he was actually bad. Like he was
actually bad.
He was a bad receiver. Like you kind of want that out of your top, an RB2 in fantasy. So just all these factors leading into him is a guy who is falling for me, not technically per ADP right now, but I think when the season comes along, if Sanders settles, by week 1 as being an ADP of like 36 to 40, I won't be surprised at all.
Yeah, one Eagles reporter said that apparently Miles Sanders and Gainwell, or Miles Sanders and Boston Scott, I apologize, could basically end up splitting touches, which is absolutely terrifying for someone that's going in the 3rd to 5th round, roughly. 5th would be really generous if you can get him there. But no, I've always hated Miles Sanders. I love Kenneth Gainwell, and last year I was big on the Boston Scott wagon. It's not anyone that I want to invest in. Miles Sanders has been pretty bad in practice lately, and Boston Scott is having almost he's only 6 touches behind him in the past few days. So really, really, really concerning. Jordan, hearing all this, were you high on Miles Sanders? Were you How do you feel now?
So I've actually never been high on Miles Sanders. I've never really necessarily disliked the guy per se. He strikes me as a guy that's never really put it together.
Exactly.
Coming out of college, like the biggest thing about him was he was Saquon Barkley's backup, and that's why he didn't have the huge numbers in college. And then with the NFL, he's been in the league for a couple of years now, and it just feels like every year there's another reason why he didn't break out. He didn't break out. And I think at a certain point you got to look and say, he may not be a bad running back, but he's probably a bad fantasy choice. And now you look at everything going on in Philadelphia, and I just think everything's working against him. You have Boston Scott, who I think I don't see him as a threat to be like a starting running back.
He's like a Tariq Cohen.
But I was just about to say Tariq Cohen. He's one of those outstanding role player guys that, he doesn't do much, but what he does do, he does very well. Kenneth Gainwell is going to take touches. I just think Miles Sanders has not solidified himself as a star at any individual aspect where I say that, he'll get this work. Like he may be the best all-around back on the team, but I don't think that he's the best at any individual skill set.
Yeah.
And so they have so many guys that I could see Miles Sanders just sitting on the bench because he's just not the best back for this situation. But then that plays out for every situation, whether it's pass protection, goal line touches, 3rd down passing. You know what I mean? I think he's the best back on that team. I just don't see him getting the work,
Yeah, no, he's very average at everything.
And then
very average at everything.
And then to top it all off, you got Jalen Hurts, who's a quarterback that can run the ball.
Exactly, yeah. It's the same. If I don't want to draft a Bills running back, I'm not necessarily going to want to draft an Eagles running back. At least Gainwell, there's some value built in at his price. That's the big difference here.
Yes, for sure, yeah.
Moving on. Actually, funny enough, the Eagles' opponent week 1, the Atlanta Falcons, I've talked a lot about Mike Davis on this podcast, and I'm going to keep talking a lot about Mike Davis because his ADP is falling, and I am so happy about it. But also, I just don't fucking understand why. Like, okay, what have we learned in the past week? We've learned that Quadri Olison, Cordarrelle Patterson, and Javian Hawkins are all looking good in training camp. Oh, great. They're looking good in training camp. Wow, a lot of guys around the NFL are looking good in training camp. Duke Williams looked good in training camp. That doesn't mean literally anything. See it in the preseason. But because one reporter already estimates them all, those 3 running backs and 1 hybrid wide receiver at 5 to 8 touches per game, all 3 of them, he said that they're going to form a committee for the RB2 spot. If they do that, they're getting 15 to 24 touches per game. How many touches does that leave for Mike Davis? Almost like nothing. He'd be getting out-touched by the bottom 3 running backs on the roster, which just doesn't make sense because they're a sophomore 5th-round pick, an undrafted rookie, and a role player who has never been able to find a spot on an NFL offense despite being able to play 2 positions, apparently. Like, it's just the people he has to compete with don't at all support, one, the ADP he was already at, around RB 28-ish, and the fact that just in the last 3 days since this news came out, his ADP is already falling again. So I don't get it. There's probably nothing that anyone could say to me that would make me think that Mike Davis won't be an RB2 this year. The fact that he's being drafted as an RB3 and it's falling now because some nobodies are looking good in training camp and preseason games haven't happened yet. If they look good in preseason, sure, I'll accept that Mike Davis might be succeeding touches to these guys. But come on, like RB28 for this dude and falling doesn't make sense. Meerkat, please tell me my Mike Davis love isn't too outlandish.
It's not outlandish. I'm not sold on him because, you look at a guy, he got his most carries ever in a season last year at age 27. It was only 165.
And that's the concern I really understand. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Mike Davis, you haven't seen a ton of him in his career, and now he's getting older. And, they do. I know he hasn't done much so far in his career, but they do like Quadriolis, and they're going to try to do some stupid shit on offense this year. I guarantee you. So that's why they have Cordarrelle Patterson. Yeah. But other than that, I think they signed D'Onta Foreman today, who I loved coming out of college.
Oh no, that was the Texans.
No, but they signed him today.
Oh, they signed him?
Texans got rid of him. It doesn't make sense. D'Onta Foreman had a great rookie season and then no touches last year.
Okay, no, never mind.
So he's a young, talented running back who had a high pick spent on him coming into his 3rd season. They just signed him. If there's been a drop today, that could imply a bit. But, before that, I think he is being disrespected a bit ADP-wise, although I'm not in love with him. I just think he's got a great ceiling because of the volume he should be getting.
And that offense is going to be on the field a lot because the defense can't get off the field. Jordan, Mike Davis, I know we've talked about him before, so maybe don't go too in-depth, but how do you feel about him with the concerns of all these other running backs behind him?
Yeah, I mean, I love that his value's falling. My opinion hasn't changed. I mean, I've never been in love with him as a player. I love his situation, though. And people can say, oh, so-and-so's looking really fantasy. Good. But pay attention to who's saying that. If a coach says, Cordarrelle Patterson's looking really good, in the sense of like he's going to be a 3-down workhorse back, or he's going to make a spot as a kick returner. You know what I mean?
Or an Isaiah McKenzie role,
right? You know what I mean? There's a lot of ways to look good in training camp and preseason, but I just, we're talking about they're all going to get 5 to 8 carries, and then you got 24 carries, let's say.
Yeah.
Would you rather give those to Mike Davis or split it between these 3 guys? I mean, if Mike Davis was in Miles Sanders' situation, I would say, stay away from him. Because I think that there's similar running backs that it's like there's not a ton to love about the individual player, but I don't think there's any – I mean, D'Onta Foreman, okay, he had a respectable rookie season. I don't think he's a star player, but there is certainly potential there. But he's really the only guy that I look at and say, okay, he's a threat. Everybody else is sort of they're role players, but I don't see them really eating into a massive workload. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like I already. Go ahead, Meerkat.
I don't know if it's just because he's a local kid and the bias, though. I think Quadri being a sleeper is very well a thing that could happen this year. They've shelved him the past 2 seasons. They've kept him on this team. They put a ton of time and work into getting him there. There was a nice story actually out by ESPN. Was it yesterday about how he's relearned the running back position this offseason, and
not even just how to run. Like his running, exactly. Like how Josh Allen had to work on his mechanics, he did the same thing.
Yeah, exactly, for the pro level, and he's been running consistently with the second team offense, getting reps with the first team. I'm not saying he's a legitimate threat from Mike Davis this year, but I'm saying Quadri Olison can't be disregarded as nothing because we haven't seen him used by them at all the past 2 years, other than a goal line guy and as a rookie, and he scored 4 touchdowns as a rookie on 23 carries.
They were all within
he's reliable there at least.
Yeah. No, I mean, like I do like Quadri as a sleeper. I think both of them can be extreme values at where they're at, but they both can't be in the same season.
And Quadri is that goal line guy that scares me a bit with Davis.
Yeah, like Davis does have giant ass thighs, but like Quadri Olison's gonna get in there too. All bets are off. Jordan, we're gonna wrap it up here soon, but I'll let you go one more time. Give us one riser, faller, your pick of the litter. Who do you want to talk about to end the show?
Well, I brought this guy up last week, and I liked him, or I don't know if it was last week or when I brought him up, but I liked him as a sleeper. I liked him as somebody that I wanted to draft, and now looks like he's getting surgery, and that is my sweet prince, Will Lutz. I'm the type of guy that I like drafting defense and kickers. If I can get a good one, I thought Will Lutz was set up for a really solid season. But kicker is one of those positions where a lower body injury, surgery this close to the season, I want no part of it for the whole season because it's so likely that can be – it's so easy for kickers to re-aggravate lower body issues. And I think he's talented. The situation was looking great. And
especially with Jameis, yeah. If Jameis is starting, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, he was to me one of those set-it-and-forget-it kickers, and now he's almost undraftable.
Yeah. Yeah, no. I mean, you know what? People shit on kickers for fantasy all the time, but most leagues have them. It is genuinely worth talking about, not with in-depth analysis, but to know now that he's getting foot surgery, you don't want a kicker with foot surgery. So it's definitely, we are going to do a Defense Wins Championships episode 2, so we're going to touch on defense before we get into the heat of draft season here. Maybe we'll do that next week. But yeah, no, kickers and Will Lutz. I always wait till the last round and just look for one with a high-powered offense. And Will Lutz will not be that this year because he's not healthy. Meerkat, say some final words for our sweet friend Will Lutz.
Oh, man, Will Lutz was a reliable guy. It sucks he's getting that surgery, but I'm a last-round kicker guy. I stream kickers a lot, kind of like defenses, but we'll get into that in the defense episode.
We will. We definitely will. And I'm sure fantasy football podcasts may be banishing us from fantasy football Reddit and anywhere like that because we brought up a kicker. But you know what? We'll just kick Jordan off the show and everyone else will be fine.
Kicker lives matter too.
Oh, geez. You know what? This is the perfect spot to end the show. Thank you, Jordan, for that natural segue. This has been a new episode of Trainwreck Fantasy Football. Thank you, Jordan, for your time. Thanks again, Meerkat. Thank you, Outlet Liquor. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in.